It was February 9th, 2026 at 2:47 a.m. when a question I could no longer contain, a question that had been burning in my chest for weeks like hot coals, drove me to a forest clearing I discovered years ago in the San Gabriel Mountains. And there, surrounded by ancient oak trees whose gnarled branches reached toward a sky so thick with stars it looked like someone had shattered diamonds across black velvet, Jesus appeared before me and revealed that the suffering of good people in isolation is not random, not punishment, but a sacred assignment that most of the church has completely misunderstood. Not everyone who sees this message is meant to see it. Some will scroll past, some will ignore it, but you've been marked. You've been marked because you know this suffering. You've felt it. You've lived it. You've been the one who gives and gives and gives, and when you finally need someone, the phone doesn't ring. You've been the one who shows up for everyone else's crisis, and when your world is falling apart, you face the walls of your home alone. You've been the one who prays for others with such faith, such conviction, and when you whisper your own desperate prayers into the darkness, heaven seems silent. And you've asked the question I asked that night: God, why? Why do good people suffer alone? Before I go any further, I need you to do something. I need you to type your prayer request in the comments right now. I don't care how long it is. I don't care how impossible it seems. I don't care if you've prayed it 1,000 times before. Type it, because what I'm about to share with you over these next few nights, what Jesus revealed to me in that forest clearing, it's specifically for people who are carrying burdens in isolation. And if you're here, if you've read this far, that's you. And listen, if you're a true believer, if you're someone who doesn't just want entertainment but actually wants to encounter the real Jesus, not the sanitized, comfortable version the modern church has created, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to share is going to challenge everything you've been taught about suffering, about isolation, about why God allows his most faithful servants to walk through valleys alone. Some of you know me from The Chosen, where I've had the profound honor of portraying Jesus for 7 seasons. But I need you to understand something. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a pastor. I'm a 51-year-old single man who has walked through his own wilderness of loneliness, who has asked these same questions in the dark, who has felt the weight of isolation even while surrounded by the noise of this world. What I'm sharing with you isn't coming from a place of academic study or religious authority. It's coming from encounters, real, tangible, terrifying, beautiful encounters with the living Christ. And this encounter, the one that began on February 9th, changed everything I thought I understood about suffering. The temperature that night had dropped to somewhere in the low 30s. I could see my breath forming clouds in the air every time I exhaled, little ghosts of vapor that disappeared into the darkness. I'd driven up the mountain road around midnight, unable to sleep, unable to silence the question that had been tormenting me for weeks. I'd been watching it happen again and again. Good people, truly good, faithful, generous people, suffering in isolation. A woman in my church who'd spent 20 years serving in children's ministry, now battling cancer alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, her phone silent. A man who'd mentored dozens of young believers, now unemployed at 58, his resume ignored, his calls unreturned, eating dinner by himself every night. A single mother who'd fostered 8 children over the years, giving them love and stability, now facing eviction. And when she reached out to her church community, she got thoughts and prayers but no actual help. And I'd been feeling it myself. The isolation, the loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being unseen, from giving everything you have and wondering if anyone would notice if you disappeared. So I drove to this clearing, this place I'd found 3 years ago during a particularly dark season. It's not easy to get to. You have to take a fire road that's barely maintained, then hike about 20 minutes up a trail that's more suggestion than path. But when you arrive, you find yourself in a circular clearing surrounded by oak trees that must be 200 years old, maybe older. Their trunks are massive, twisted, scarred by time and weather. And in the center of the clearing, there's a flat rock, smooth and wide, perfect for sitting. The clearing sits on a ridge, so when you look west, you can see the lights of the valley below, a sprawling constellation of human life. But when you look up, when you let your eyes adjust to the darkness, the stars are so bright, so numerous, it's almost overwhelming. I sat on that rock at 2:47 a.m., and I asked the question out loud: why do good people suffer alone? My voice sounded small in that vast space. The wind moved through the oak branches above me, creating a sound like whispered conversations in a language I couldn't quite understand. The air smelled of earth and pine and something else, something clean and ancient that you can only smell in wild places far from civilization. Why? I asked again, louder this time. Why do the people who give the most, who love the most, Who serve the most? Why do they end up isolated in their pain? Why doesn't the church show up? Why don't you show up? The moment those words left my mouth, I felt it, a change in the atmosphere. You know how right before a thunderstorm, there's this electric quality to the air, this sense of anticipation, of something powerful about to be released? It was like that, but more intense. The hair on my arms stood up, the wind stopped completely, and, I mean completely, like someone had pressed a pause button on the entire forest. And then I saw him. He didn't appear gradually. He was just suddenly there, standing about 10 feet in front of me, between me and the western view of the valley. He was wearing simple clothes, a dark robe, nothing ornate, and his face, God, his face. I've tried to capture it in The Chosen, tried to convey the combination of strength and tenderness, authority and compassion, but no performance can touch the reality. His eyes were dark, deep, and they were filled with tears, not just moist, not just glistening. Tears were streaming down his face. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice was like nothing I can adequately describe. It was gentle, but it filled the entire clearing, seemed to resonate in my chest, in my bones. "You asked why good people suffer alone." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I was frozen on that rock, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. He took a step closer, and as he moved, I noticed something extraordinary. The starlight seemed to bend toward him, seemed to gather around him like he was pulling light itself into his presence. The ancient oaks swayed, their branches bowing slightly in his direction, even though there was still no wind. "They don't," he said. "What?" I managed to whisper. "They don't suffer alone," he repeated, and now his voice carried something that broke me. It carried pain, deep, ancient pain. "I am with them in every moment of their isolation. I am with them in every unanswered phone call. I am with them in every silent evening. I am with them in every hospital room where no visitors come. I am with them in every financial crisis where no help arrives. They are never, ever alone." "Then why does it feel like they are?" I asked, and I was crying now too, tears hot on my cold cheeks. "Why does it feel like abandonment?" He moved closer still, until he was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. His presence was overwhelming, not frightening, but so intense, so concentrated that it was almost too much to bear. "Because," he said, "isolation is the crucible where I forge my most powerful warriors, and the enemy has convinced my church that suffering alone is a sign of failure, a sign of sin, a sign of being forgotten by God. But it's not. It's a sign of being chosen for something greater." The moment he said those words, the clearing changed. Or maybe my perception changed. Suddenly I could see beyond the physical. The air around us filled with images, with visions, like someone was projecting scenes onto an invisible screen that surrounded us completely. I saw a woman, middle-aged, sitting alone in a small apartment. The vision was so clear, so detailed. I could see the worn carpet, the second-hand furniture, the single lamp providing dim light. She was on her knees beside her bed, praying. Her face was wet with tears, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "This is Margaret," Jesus said softly. "For 30 years she has served in homeless ministry. She has fed thousands. She has clothed hundreds. She has led dozens to me. And now she has stage 4 ovarian cancer, and she is alone. Her husband left her 15 years ago. Her children are scattered across the country, too busy with their own lives to visit. Her church knows she's sick, but no one comes. No one calls. She prays every night, asking me why she must face this alone." I watched Margaret pray, and my heart was breaking. "Why?" I asked. "Why her? Why like this?" Jesus turned to look at me, and the intensity in his eyes was almost unbearable. "Because Margaret's prayers in that room, in that isolation, are breaking demonic strongholds over her entire city. Because her faith in the darkness, her choice to worship me even when it feels like I'm absent, is creating cracks in the enemy's armor that will lead to a revival she won't live to see with earthly eyes, but will celebrate with me in eternity. Because her suffering is not meaningless, it is warfare, and she is winning." The vision shifted. Now I saw a man, older, maybe late 60s, sitting in a car in a parking lot. It was raining in the vision, water streaming down the windshield. He had his head in his hands, and his shoulders were shaking with sobs. "This is Robert," Jesus continued. "He was a pastor for 40 years. He poured his life into his congregation. He married their children, buried their parents, counseled them through every crisis. And then he made one mistake. He admitted he was struggling with depression. He was honest about his own pain. And they forced him to resign. They said a pastor shouldn't be weak. They said he was disqualifying himself by admitting he needed help. Now he's 67 years old, and no church will hire him. He's working part-time at a hardware store. He lives alone. He eats alone. And he's asking me why his honesty cost him everything. I was sobbing now, my whole body shaking. "This is wrong," I said. "This is so wrong. Where is the church? Where are the people he served?" "Comfortable," Jesus said, and there was an edge to his voice now, something sharp. "They are comfortable in their buildings, comfortable in their programs, comfortable in their theology that says suffering is always a result of sin or lack of faith. They have forgotten that I said, 'In this world you will have trouble.' They have forgotten that I called them to bear one another's burdens. They have forgotten that the early church was known not for their buildings or their programs, but for their love, their radical, inconvenient, costly love." The wind suddenly returned, rushing through the clearing with such force that the oak branches groaned and swayed. The temperature seemed to drop even further, and I pulled my jacket tighter around myself. "But here's what the church doesn't understand," Jesus said, and he sat down on the rock beside me. The casualness of the gesture was startling. The King of Kings, sitting on a rock in a forest clearing at 3 a.m, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Here's what I need you to tell them. The people who suffer alone, the good people who walk through valleys in isolation, they are not being punished. They are not being forgotten. They are being trusted." "Trusted?" I asked. "Trusted," he repeated firmly. "Jonathan, when I need someone to hold the line in the spiritual realm, when I need someone whose prayers will shake the foundations of darkness, when I need someone whose faith will stand as a testimony that I am enough even when everything else is stripped away, I choose people who are willing to suffer in isolation, because that's where the real battle is fought. Not in the spotlight, not on the stage, not in the comfortable community of believers who all agree with each other, but in the lonely room, in the silent night, in the place where there is nothing left but me." He stood up and walked to the edge of the clearing, looking out over the valley lights below. I watched his silhouette against the stars, and I realized I was witnessing something I would never forget, something that would mark the rest of my life. "Margaret's prayers in that apartment are more powerful than 1,000 sermons preached to comfortable congregations," he said. "Robert's faith in that parking lot is more precious to me than all the worship songs sung by people who have never truly suffered, because they have discovered what most never discover, that I am enough, that my presence is sufficient, that even when every human support is stripped away, I remain." The vision changed again, and this time I saw something that made me gasp. I saw the spiritual realm overlaid on the physical. I saw Margaret in her apartment, but now I could see what was happening in the unseen world. Angels surrounded her, not just one or two, but dozens, standing guard, their presence so bright it was like looking at the sun. And as she prayed, I saw her words, actual visible words, rising like golden light, piercing through layers of darkness, shattering demonic structures that had been built over her city for generations. I saw Robert in his car, and around him I saw the same thing: angels, light, his tears falling like weapons, his broken prayers like bombs exploding in enemy territory. "This is what isolation looks like in the spiritual realm," Jesus said. "This is what the church can't see because they're too busy judging, too busy assuming that suffering means failure. They see Margaret and think, she must have unconfessed sin. They see Robert and think, he must lack faith. But I see warriors. I see champions. I see people who are willing to stand in the gap, even when no one is standing with them." He turned back to face me, and the tears were still streaming down his face. "And it breaks my heart," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "It breaks my heart that my church has become so comfortable, so self-focused, so obsessed with their own blessings and breakthroughs that they have forgotten the ones who are fighting in the darkness. It breaks my heart that the people who need community the most are the ones who are most often abandoned. It breaks my heart that suffering has become something to hide, something to be ashamed of, instead of something to be shared and carried together." The clearing was completely silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant rustle of wind through the trees beyond our circle of ancient oaks. "So why," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, "why do you allow it? If it breaks your heart, why don't you change it?" Jesus came back and sat beside me again. He was close enough now that I could feel warmth radiating from him, cutting through the cold night air. Because I'm not looking for a church that only loves when it's convenient, he said. I'm not looking for a church that only serves when it feels good. I'm not looking for a church that only shows up when there's something in it for them. I'm looking for a church that looks like me. And I suffered alone. In the Garden of Gethsemane, where were my disciples? Sleeping. On the cross, where were my followers? Scattered. I understand isolation. I understand abandonment. I understand what it feels like to cry out and hear silence. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with such intensity that it seemed to vibrate in my chest. And that's exactly why the people who suffer alone are so precious to me, because they are walking the path I walked. They are experiencing what I experienced. They are being conformed to my image in the deepest, most profound way possible. And one day soon, I'm going to reveal what their suffering accomplished. I'm going to pull back the curtain and show the church what was really happening in those lonely rooms, in those silent nights, in those isolated valleys. And the church will weep. They will weep for what they missed. They will weep for the warriors they ignored. They will weep for the opportunities they had to be my hands and feet, and they chose comfort instead. The sky was beginning to change. I could see the faintest hint of light on the eastern horizon, that deep blue that comes before dawn. The stars were starting to fade, and the details of the clearing were becoming more visible. The texture of the oak bark, the scattered leaves on the ground, the rough surface of the rock we sat on. I have more to show you, Jesus said, standing up. Tomorrow night. Come back tomorrow night. Same time, same place. Because what I've shown you tonight is just the beginning. You asked why good people suffer alone. I've given you part of the answer, but there's more. There's so much more, and you need to understand all of it, because you're going to tell them. You're going to tell Margaret and Robert and the thousands like them that they are not forgotten, that they are not abandoned, that their suffering is not meaningless, that they are warriors, and I am with them, and they are winning battles they can't even see. He started to fade, the light of dawn seeming to absorb him, or maybe he was becoming part of the light itself. Tomorrow night, he said again, his voice echoing even as his form disappeared. There's more you need to see. There's more you need to understand. Because the church is about to face a reckoning, and the ones who suffered alone are going to be revealed as the heroes they truly are. And then he was gone. I sat on that rock as the sun rose, as the clearing filled with golden morning light, as the birds began their dawn chorus in the ancient oaks around me. I was shaking, from cold, from emotion, from the weight of what I'd just experienced, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that my life had just changed forever. Tomorrow night, I'll tell you what happened when I returned to that clearing. I'll tell you what Jesus revealed about the scope of this issue, about how widespread it is, about the judgment that's coming for a church that has abandoned its suffering members. I'll tell you about the visions he showed me, about the specific people whose stories will break your heart and ignite your faith. But right now, I need you to do something. I need you to type in the comments, I am marked, because if you've read this far, if this message has resonated in your spirit, you are marked. You're either someone who is suffering in isolation, or you're someone who is being called to see them, to help them, to be the church to them. Type it now. I am marked. And come back tomorrow night, because what Jesus showed me on the second night, it's going to change everything you think you know about suffering, about isolation, about the purpose of pain. This is just the beginning. I didn't sleep on February 9th. How could I? After what I'd witnessed in that clearing, after what Jesus had revealed to me, sleep felt impossible, almost irreverent. I spent the entire day in a fog, going through the motions of normal life while my mind kept returning to that rock, to those ancient oaks, to his tear-stained face, to the visions of Margaret and Robert and the spiritual warfare happening in their isolation. I tried to tell a friend about it over coffee that afternoon. I tried to put into words what I'd experienced, but everything I said sounded inadequate, almost foolish. How do you explain to someone that you sat with Jesus in a forest clearing at 3 a.m? How do you describe the weight of his presence, the reality of the spiritual realm breaking through into the physical? My friend nodded politely, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes, the unspoken question. Are you okay, Jonathan? I wasn't okay. I was marked, changed, ruined for normal Christianity. By the time night fell on February 10th, I was already in my car, driving up that mountain road. I arrived at the trailhead around 11:30 p.m., earlier than the night before, unable to wait. The hike up to the clearing felt different this time, charged with anticipation, with holy fear, with the certainty that I was walking towards something that would break me open even further. The temperature had dropped even more than the previous night. It was in the mid-20s, cold enough that my breath came out in thick clouds, cold enough that my fingers ached even inside my gloves. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness as I navigated the narrow trail, illuminating twisted roots and scattered rocks, the skeletal branches of manzanita bushes reaching across the path like gnarled fingers. When I emerged into the clearing at 1:15 a.m., I stopped dead in my tracks. The place looked different. Not physically, the ancient oaks were still there, their massive trunks dark against the star-filled sky, the flat rock still sitting in the center like an altar. But there was something in the atmosphere, something I could feel but not see. It was like the clearing was waiting, holding its breath, anticipating what was about to happen. I walked to the rock and sat down, and immediately I felt it, that same electric quality in the air, that same sense of the veil between worlds growing thin. But this time I also felt something else. Fear. Not the fear of being harmed, but the fear of seeing too much, of understanding too much, of having my comfortable theology shattered beyond repair. Jesus, I whispered into the darkness, I'm here, I came back. The wind rose immediately, sweeping through the clearing with such force that the oak branches groaned and swayed violently. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees in an instant, and I could see my breath coming faster now, little clouds of vapor that disappeared into the night. And then he was there. This time, he appeared differently. He was standing at the eastern edge of the clearing, silhouetted against the stars, and as I watched, he began to walk toward me slowly, deliberately. With each step he took, the starlight seemed to intensify, seemed to gather around him until he was walking in a column of silver light that made the clearing bright as day. When he reached me, he didn't sit, he stood in front of me, and his face, God, his face was different than the night before. The tears were still there, still streaming down his cheeks, but now there was something else in his expression. Anger, righteous burning anger mixed with the grief. Jonathan, he said, and his voice carried a weight that made the ground beneath me seem to tremble. Last night I showed you two people, Margaret and Robert, two warriors suffering in isolation. Tonight, I'm going to show you the scope of this. I'm going to show you how widespread this abandonment has become, and I'm going to show you why it's happening. He raised his hand, and suddenly the clearing transformed. The air filled with images again, but this time there weren't just one or two visions. There were hundreds, thousands surrounding us in every direction like we were standing in the center of a sphere made of human suffering. I saw an elderly man sitting alone in a nursing home, staring at a phone that never rang, even though he'd been a deacon in his church for 40 years. I saw a young woman in her 20s, lying in a hospital bed after a suicide attempt, and the hospital room was empty. No visitors, no flowers, no cards, even though she'd led worship at her church every Sunday for 3 years. I saw a middle-aged couple sitting at their kitchen table, surrounded by bills they couldn't pay, medical debt from their daughter's cancer treatment, and their church small group had stopped inviting them to gatherings because they were always so negative. I saw a man in his 50s, recently divorced, sitting alone in a studio apartment with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a single lamp, and he'd been a youth pastor for 20 years before his wife left him, and now his church had asked him to step down because divorced people weren't good role models. The visions kept coming, wave after wave, and I was sobbing, my whole body shaking with the weight of it all. There were so many good people, faithful people, people who had given everything to the church, now suffering in complete isolation. Do you see? Jesus asked, and his voice was thick with emotion. Do you see how many? Do you see how widespread this has become? Why? I choked out. Why are there so many? He waved his hand again, and the visions changed. Now I was seeing something different. I was seeing churches, hundreds of them, thousands of them, beautiful buildings with state-of-the-art sound systems and comfortable seating and professional lighting. I saw services with passionate worship and polished sermons and enthusiastic crowds. I saw programs and events and conferences. But then Jesus did something that made my blood run cold. He showed me the same churches from a different perspective, from the spiritual realm, and what I saw was horrifying. The buildings were empty, not physically. They were full of people, but spiritually, they were hollow. There was no presence, no power, no glory, just noise and activity and performance. And outside these buildings, scattered in the darkness beyond, I saw lights, thousands of individual lights, flickering alone in the darkness. The isolated believers, the suffering saints, the abandoned warriors. This is what my church has become. Jesus said, and his voice was breaking. They have become so focused on the show, on the experience, on the building, on the growth, on the numbers, that they have completely forgotten the one thing I commanded them to do: love one another, bear one another's burdens, weep with those who weep, visit the sick, care for the widow and the orphan, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger. He turned to face me directly, and the intensity in his eyes was almost unbearable. They have replaced relationship with programs, he continued. They have replaced genuine community with small groups that meet for 6 weeks and then dissolve. They have replaced sacrificial love with convenient service projects that make them feel good but cost them nothing. They have replaced the messy, difficult, inconvenient work of actually caring for suffering people with prayer chains and Facebook posts that say thoughts and prayers but offer no actual help. The wind was howling now, whipping through the clearing with such force that I had to brace myself to keep from being knocked off the rock. The ancient oaks were bending, their branches thrashing against the sky, and I could hear the sound of smaller branches breaking and falling to the ground around us. "And do you know why?" Jesus asked, his voice rising above the wind. "Do you know why the church has become so comfortable abandoning the suffering?" I shook my head, unable to speak, unable to. "Because they have embraced a false gospel," he said. "They have embraced a gospel that says faith equals blessing, that righteousness equals prosperity, that if you're suffering, you must be doing something wrong. They have embraced a gospel that makes them the center of the story instead of me. They have embraced a gospel that promises them their best life now instead of preparing them to take up their cross and follow me." He began to pace, and with each step, the ground seemed to pulse with energy. The starlight was so bright now that I could see every detail of the clearing as if it were midday, every leaf, every stone, every crack in the bark of the ancient oaks. "They preach about breakthrough and victory and abundance," he continued, "but they never preach about the valley of the shadow of death. They never preach about the dark night of the soul. They never preach about the refining fire that burns away everything that isn't truly me. They never preach about the fellowship of my sufferings. They never preach about being conformed to my death so that they might know the power of my resurrection." He stopped pacing and stood directly in front of me, so close I could have reached out and touched him. "And so when someone in their congregation begins to suffer, really suffer, not just a temporary inconvenience, but deep, prolonged, crushing suffering, they don't know what to do with them. That person becomes a threat to their theology. That person becomes a contradiction to their gospel of constant victory. That person becomes uncomfortable, inconvenient, a reminder that their neat little formulas don't actually work. And so they do what humans have always done with uncomfortable truths. They ignore them, they avoid them, they abandon them." The visions returned, but this time they were more specific, more detailed. Jesus was showing me the mechanisms of abandonment, the ways the church pushes away its suffering members. I saw a woman with chronic illness being told by her pastor that she just needed to have more faith, that her sickness was a result of unconfessed sin, and when she couldn't get healed, she was quietly removed from leadership positions and eventually stopped being invited to church events. I saw a man who lost his job being told by his small group that he needed to speak prosperity and claim his blessing, and when months went by and he still couldn't find work, the group members started avoiding him because his continued unemployment made them uncomfortable, made them question whether their prosperity gospel actually worked. I saw a single mother struggling with depression being told that depression was a sin, that she just needed to choose joy. And when medication and therapy didn't make her instantly happy, she was labeled as someone who wasn't really surrendered to God, and people stopped calling, stopped checking in, stopped caring. I saw a teenager who came out as gay being told he was an abomination, being subjected to conversion therapy, and when he attempted suicide, his parents were blamed for not praying hard enough, and the family was quietly asked to find another church. "Stop," I said, my voice breaking. "Please stop. I can't see anymore." But Jesus didn't stop. The visions kept coming, faster now, overwhelming me with the sheer scope of the church's failure to love its suffering members. "You need to see this," he said firmly. "You need to see all of it, because you're going to tell them, you're going to hold up a mirror to the church and show them what they've become. You're going to tell them that I am not pleased, that I am not impressed with their buildings or their programs or their conferences or their worship experiences, that I am looking for the one thing that matters: love, genuine, costly, sacrificial, inconvenient love." He raised both hands, and the vision suddenly stopped. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of wind moving through the oak branches. The temperature seemed to stabilize, and the intense brightness faded back to normal starlight. Jesus sat down on the rock beside me, and we sat in silence for a long moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter, gentler, but no less intense. "Jonathan, I need you to understand something," he said. "The people who suffer alone, they are not suffering because I have abandoned them. They are suffering because my church has abandoned them. And there is a difference, a crucial difference." He turned to look at me, and I saw such tenderness in his eyes, such compassion mixed with the grief and anger. "When I allow someone to walk through suffering, I am always with them," he continued. "Always. I never leave. I never forsake. I am in the hospital room. I am in the lonely apartment. I am in the car where they weep. I am in the darkness where they question. I am there. But my church has decided that suffering people are too messy, too complicated, too time-consuming. My church has decided that it's easier to focus on the people who are doing well, the people who are succeeding, the people who make them look good." He stood up and walked to the western edge of the clearing, looking out over the valley lights below. I followed him, standing beside him, looking at the sprawling constellation of human life spread out beneath us. "Every one of those lights represents a person," he said softly, "and in this valley alone there are thousands, thousands of my followers who are suffering in isolation, who are crying out for help and hearing nothing but silence from the people who claim to be my body, who are drowning and watching the church sail past in their comfortable boats, waving and smiling and saying, 'God bless you,' but never stopping to pull them out of the water." He pointed to a specific area of the valley, and suddenly I could see it, not with my physical eyes, but with spiritual sight. I could see the isolated believers scattered throughout the city like stars in the darkness, each one alone, each one suffering, each one wondering why the church had forgotten them. "And here's what breaks my heart most," Jesus said, his voice cracking. "Many of these people, most of these people, they still believe. They still have faith. They still love me. They're not angry at me. They're not blaming me. They understand that suffering is part of the journey. What they don't understand is why my people, why the church, why the community that is supposed to reflect my love has abandoned them in their darkest hour." I was crying again, tears streaming down my face, freezing on my cheeks in the cold night air. "I've been there," I said quietly. "I've been one of those lights. I've been the one suffering alone, wondering why no one called, why no one checked in, why no one seemed to notice or care." Jesus turned to look at me, and there was such knowing in his eyes. "I know," he said. "Why do you think I brought you here? Why do you think I'm showing you this? Because you understand, because you've walked this path, because you can speak to this with authority, not the authority of academic study, but the authority of lived experience." He placed his hand on my shoulder, and the warmth that radiated from his touch was like fire, like liquid light flowing through my entire body. "You're 51 years old," he said. "You're single. You don't have children. You've walked through seasons of profound loneliness, seasons where you questioned your worth, your purpose, your place in my kingdom. You've been in rooms full of people and felt completely alone. You've given and given and given, and when you needed someone, the phone didn't ring. You understand this suffering in a way that many don't." I nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the fact that he knew, that he saw, that he understood every lonely night, every unanswered prayer, every moment of isolation I'd ever experienced. "And that's exactly why I can use you to speak this message," he continued, "because it's not theoretical for you, it's not abstract, it's your story, it's your pain, it's your journey. And when you tell them what I'm showing you, they'll know it's real. They'll know you're not speaking from a place of judgment, but from a place of understanding." The sky was beginning to change again. I could see the faintest hint of light on the eastern horizon, that deep blue that precedes dawn. We'd been in the clearing for hours, though it had felt like minutes. "There's more," Jesus said. "Tomorrow night, tonight actually, since it's already past midnight, I'm going to show you the consequences. I'm going to show you what happens when a church abandons its suffering members. I'm going to show you the judgment that's coming, because make no mistake, Jonathan, there will be a reckoning. There will be a day when I separate the sheep from the goats, and the criteria won't be how big their church was, or how many people attended their conferences, or how professional their worship experience was. The criteria will be, I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the ground beneath my feet seem to tremble. And many, many who think they are first will be last. Many who think they are building my kingdom are actually building their own empire. Many who think they are serving me are actually serving themselves. And the ones they ignored, the ones they abandoned, the ones who suffered alone, those are the ones who will be revealed as the true heroes of faith. The light was growing stronger now, the stars beginning to fade, the details of the clearing becoming more visible. Jesus started to fade with the coming dawn, his form becoming translucent, merging with the morning light. "Come back tonight," he said, his voice echoing even as his form disappeared. "Same time, same place. Because what I show you next, it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever witnessed. It's going to break you, but you need to see it. You need to understand the full scope of what's at stake. You need to understand what the church is about to face if they don't repent, if they don't return to genuine love, if they don't start actually caring for the suffering instead of just posting about them on social media." And then he was gone, and I was alone in the clearing as the sun rose, as the ancient oaks emerged from shadow into golden morning light, as the birds began their chorus and the world woke up around me. I stumbled back down the trail to my car, exhausted, emotionally wrecked, spiritually transformed. I drove home in a daze, and when I finally collapsed into bed at 7:30 a.m., I slept the sleep of the dead, dreamless and deep. But even in sleep, I could feel it, the weight of what I'd seen, the burden of what I'd been shown, the responsibility of carrying this message to a church that desperately needs to hear it, but probably doesn't want to. Tonight, in just a few hours, I'll return to that clearing. I'll sit on that rock under those ancient oaks, and Jesus will show me the consequences, the judgment, the reckoning that's coming for a church that has forgotten how to love its suffering members. And I'm terrified. I'm terrified of what I'm going to see. I'm terrified of what I'm going to have to tell you. I'm terrified of the response, of the pushback, of the people who will call me a false prophet or a heretic or someone who's just seeking attention. But I'm more terrified of staying silent. I'm more terrified of knowing what I know and not speaking it. I'm more terrified of standing before Jesus one day and having him ask me, "Why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you warn them? Why didn't you hold up the mirror and show them what they'd become?" So I'm going back tonight. And tomorrow I'll tell you everything. But right now, I need you to do something. I need you to look at your own life, your own church, your own community. I need you to ask yourself, who are the suffering ones that I've ignored? Who are the isolated believers that I've scrolled past? Who are the people crying out for help that I've responded to with nothing but thoughts and prayers? Type in the comments, "I see them now." Because if this message is reaching you, if it's resonating in your spirit, then you're being called to be part of the solution. You're being called to be the church that actually shows up, that actually loves, that actually bears the burdens of the suffering instead of abandoning them. Type it now. "I see them now," and come back tomorrow, because what Jesus shows me on the third night, it's going to change everything. It's going to reveal the consequences of abandonment. It's going to show the judgment that's coming, and it's going to offer a path forward, a way for the church to repent and return to genuine love before it's too late. This is just the beginning of the reckoning. I woke up at 9 p.m. on February 11th with a sense of dread so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I'd slept through most of the day, but it hadn't been restful sleep. It had been the kind of sleep where you're half aware the entire time, where dreams and reality blur together, where you wake up more exhausted than when you lay down. I knew what was coming. Jesus had told me, "What I show you next, it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever witnessed. It's going to break you." I didn't want to go back to that clearing. Every fiber of my being wanted to stay home, to pretend the last 2 nights hadn't happened, to return to the comfortable ignorance of not knowing, not seeing, not understanding the depth of the church's failure to love its suffering members. But I couldn't. I was marked, changed, ruined for comfortable Christianity. I got in my car at 11:45 p.m. and drove up that mountain road for the third night in a row. The temperature had dropped even further. The dashboard thermometer read 19 degrees. A cold front had moved through during the day, bringing with it a clarity to the air that made the stars look close enough to touch. As I hiked up the trail, I noticed something I hadn't noticed the previous nights. The forest was completely silent. No wind, no animal sounds, no rustling in the underbrush, just my footsteps on the frozen ground and my breath coming out in thick clouds. It was like the entire mountain was holding its breath, waiting, I emerged into the clearing at 1:33 a.m., and immediately I knew this night was different. The ancient oaks were covered in frost, their branches glittering in the starlight like they'd been dipped in diamonds. The flat rock in the center of the clearing was coated with a thin layer of ice that reflected the stars above, making it look like a mirror showing another sky. And the air was so cold it hurt to breathe, each inhalation like swallowing knives. But it wasn't the physical cold that made me stop at the edge of the clearing. It was the spiritual atmosphere. The presence was so thick, so heavy, so intense that it was almost suffocating. This wasn't just the veil between worlds growing thin. This was the veil being torn open. I walked slowly to the rock, my boots crunching on the frost-covered ground, each step echoing in the silence. I sat down, and the cold from the ice-covered stone immediately seeped through my jeans, through my layers, into my bones. "Jesus," I whispered, "I'm here." The response was immediate and terrifying. Thunder. Not distant thunder, but thunder that seemed to come from directly above, so loud and so close that I felt it in my chest, in my teeth, in my skull. The ground shook. The ancient oaks swayed violently despite there being no wind. And the sky began to change. The stars were disappearing, not because of clouds, but because of light. Brilliant, blazing, overwhelming light that was pouring down from above like a waterfall, like a flood, like the heavens themselves were opening and emptying their glory into this small clearing on a mountain in California. And in the center of that light he descended, not walked, not appeared, descended like he was coming down from the throne room of heaven itself, surrounded by light so bright I had to shield my eyes, so intense that the frost on the trees began to melt and steam rose from the ground as frozen earth met holy fire. When he touched down on the clearing floor, the light didn't diminish. If anything, it intensified. He was glowing, radiating power and authority and something else, something that made every cell in my body want to simultaneously run toward him and run away from him. His face was different tonight. The tears were gone, the tenderness was gone. What I saw in his eyes was pure, undiluted, righteous fury. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice was like thunder, like an earthquake, like the sound of many waters. "Tonight you will see what I see. Tonight you will witness the consequences of a church that has abandoned its suffering members. Tonight you will understand why I said, 'Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven.'" He raised his hand, and the clearing transformed. We were no longer in the forest, or rather we were still in the forest, but we were also somewhere else, somewhere that existed outside of time, outside of normal reality. I was seeing from a perspective that human eyes aren't meant to see from, understanding things that human minds aren't designed to understand. I saw the church, not a building, but the actual body of believers, millions of them, spread across the earth like a vast network of light, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. The network was breaking, fragmenting. Large sections of it were going dark, not because people were losing their faith in Jesus, but because they were losing their connection to each other. The body was tearing itself apart, isolating into individual cells that no longer functioned as a unified whole. "Do you see?" Jesus asked, his voice still carrying that terrible authority. "Do you see what happens when my people forget that they are a body? When they forget that if one part suffers, all parts suffer with it? When they forget that they are called to be connected, interdependent, bearing one another's burdens?" The vision zoomed in, and I began to see specific consequences, specific judgments, specific reckonings that were coming, that were already here. I saw a megachurch, one I recognized, with thousands of members and a celebrity pastor. The building was beautiful, state-of-the-art, worth millions. But as I watched, I saw the spiritual reality behind the physical appearance. The building was empty, hollow. There was no presence of God there, just noise and performance and human effort. And outside the building, scattered in the darkness, I saw hundreds of former members, people who had suffered and been abandoned, people who had cried out for help and been ignored, people who had needed the church and been told to have more faith or pray harder or confess your sin. And then I saw something that made me gasp. I saw angels, not the gentle, comforting angels of popular imagination, but terrifying warriors with flaming swords, and they were writing something on the walls of that church building. I couldn't read the words, but I knew what they meant. Judgment, Ichabod. The glory has departed. "That church has 5 years," Jesus said, his voice cold and final. 5 years to repent, to return to genuine love, to actually care for the suffering instead of just using them for testimonies when they get their breakthrough. 5 years, and then I will remove their lampstand. I will scatter their congregation. I will expose their pastors' pride and their leadership's corruption, and the building they spent millions on will stand empty, a monument to their failure to love. The vision shifted, and I saw another church, smaller this time, in a suburban area. Same thing, beautiful building, professional programs, enthusiastic worship, but spiritually dead. And outside, in the darkness, I saw a woman. I recognized her from the previous night's visions, the single mother with depression who had been told her mental illness was sin. She was in her car in the church parking lot, and she had a bottle of pills in her hand. "No," I whispered. "No, please." But Jesus didn't stop the vision. I watched as she swallowed the pills, as she closed her eyes, as her breathing slowed and then stopped. And I watched as her spirit left her body and angels came to carry her home, not to judgment, but to rest, to peace, to the arms of a Savior who had never abandoned her even when his church had. "She is with me now," Jesus said softly, and for the first time that night I heard tenderness in his voice. "She is safe, she is loved, she is free from the pain that my church refused to help her bear, but her blood is on their hands." The vision zoomed out, and I saw the pastor of that church sleeping peacefully in his comfortable home, completely unaware that one of his congregation members had just died alone in his parking lot, and I saw angels writing on his door, on his church, on his ministry. Judgment. "He will stand before me one day," Jesus said, and his voice was hard again, "and he will say, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name?' And I will declare to him, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Because he knew her name, he knew she was suffering, he knew she needed help, and he did nothing. He was too busy building his brand, growing his platform, planning his next sermon series. He had time for everything except the one thing that mattered, loving the suffering person right in front of him. The visions kept coming, faster now, overwhelming me with the scope of the judgment that was falling on the church. I saw a worship leader who had built a career on singing about God's love, but who had ignored his own brother's desperate calls for help when his brother lost his job and faced homelessness. I saw the brother living on the streets now, and I saw angels marking the worship leader's ministry for destruction. I saw a small group leader who had taught Bible studies about community and fellowship for years, but who had ghosted a group member when that member's chronic illness became too much of a downer. I saw the chronically ill woman alone in her apartment, and I saw angels marking the small group leader's home, her family, her future. I saw a youth pastor who had preached about Jesus' love to teenagers for a decade, but who had rejected his own son when his son came out as gay. I saw the son, now 19, estranged from his family, struggling with suicidal thoughts, and I saw angels marking the youth pastor's ministry, his marriage, his reputation. "Stop!" I screamed. "Please stop. I can't take any more." But Jesus didn't stop. His face was set like flint, his eyes blazing with holy fire. "You need to see this," he said, his voice like iron. "You need to see all of it because you're going to tell them, you're going to warn them, you're going to give them one last chance to repent before the full weight of my judgment falls." The visions shifted again, and now I was seeing something even more terrifying. I was seeing the future, not the distant future, but the near future, the next few years. I saw churches closing by the thousands, not because of persecution or cultural opposition, but because the presence of God had left them. I saw buildings standing empty, for sale signs in their parking lots, congregations scattered and confused, wondering what had happened. I saw celebrity pastors falling, one after another, their hidden sins exposed, their empires crumbling, their followers disillusioned and hurt. I saw a great shaking coming to the American church, a separation of the wheat from the chaff, the sheep from the goats, the genuine from the counterfeit. And in the midst of all this destruction, all this judgment, I saw something else. I saw the isolated believers, the suffering saints, the abandoned warriors, the Margarets and Roberts and countless others who had been faithful in the darkness, who had maintained their faith even when the church had failed them. And I saw them rising. I saw them being vindicated. I saw them being revealed as the true heroes of faith. I saw Jesus gathering them, healing them, honoring them, and then sending them out to build something new. A church that actually looked like him, a church that actually loved the suffering, a church that actually bore one another's burdens. "This is what's coming," Jesus said, and his voice was filled with both grief and hope. Judgment for those who have failed to love, and vindication for those who have suffered in faithfulness. A great shaking that will separate the true from the false, a refining fire that will burn away everything that isn't genuinely me. He turned to face me directly, and the intensity in his eyes was almost unbearable. And you, Jonathan, you're going to be part of this. You're going to speak this message. You're going to warn the comfortable church that their time is running out. You're going to tell the suffering saints that they haven't been forgotten, that their faithfulness in isolation has been seen and will be rewarded. You're going to be a voice crying in the wilderness, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." The light around him began to intensify even further, and I had to close my eyes against the brightness. When I opened them again, we were back in the clearing, but everything had changed. The sun was rising, not gradually, but suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch. The eastern sky exploded with color, deep purples and brilliant oranges and reds so vivid they didn't look real. The frost on the ancient oaks caught the light and sparkled like fire, and the air, which had been so cold it hurt to breathe, suddenly warmed, and I could smell spring, earth and growth and new life, even though it was still February. Jesus was standing at the eastern edge of the clearing, silhouetted against that impossible sunrise, and his form was changing, becoming translucent, merging with the light. "The judgment is coming," he said, his voice echoing across the clearing, across the mountain, across what felt like the entire world. But so is the restoration. The church that has failed will fall, but a new church will rise, a church that actually loves, that actually serves, that actually bears the burdens of the suffering, a church that looks like me. He raised his hands toward the sky, and the light intensified until I had to shield my eyes completely. "Tell them," he commanded, and his voice was like thunder again. "Tell them that I am not mocked. Tell them that whatever they sow, they will reap. Tell them that if they have abandoned the suffering, they have abandoned me. Tell them that the time for comfortable Christianity is over. Tell them that I am coming soon, and when I come, I will separate the sheep from the goats based on one criteria. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." The light became so bright that I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything except his voice echoing in my mind, in my heart, in my very soul. "Tell them that the suffering saints they ignored are the ones I will honor. Tell them that the isolated believers they abandoned are the ones I will vindicate. Tell them that the good people who suffered alone are the ones who will be revealed as my true disciples. Tell them that time is running out. Tell them to repent. Tell them to return to genuine love. Tell them that I am watching, I am weighing, I am judging, and I will not be patient forever." And then, as suddenly as it had come, the light vanished. The clearing returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after what I'd just witnessed. The sun was fully up now, a regular February morning, cold and clear. The frost on the trees was melting, dripping onto the ground with soft pattering sounds. Birds were singing. The world was waking up. But I was destroyed. I collapsed onto the rock, my whole body shaking, tears streaming down my face, sobs tearing from my chest. I had seen too much. I had understood too much. I had been given a burden too heavy to carry. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The frost completely melted. Hikers passed by on the trail below, their voices distant and cheerful, completely unaware that just above them, in this clearing, the veil between heaven and earth had been torn open and the judgment of God had been revealed. Finally, when I had no more tears left, when my body was too exhausted to shake any more, I stood up. My legs were stiff from sitting in the cold for so long. My face was raw from crying. My heart felt like it had been broken open and put back together differently. I walked to the edge of the clearing and looked out over the valley one last time. The city spread out below me, millions of people going about their lives, completely unaware of what was coming. And scattered throughout that city, I knew, were the isolated believers, the suffering saints, the abandoned warriors, the ones Jesus had shown me, the ones he was watching over, the ones he would vindicate. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the view, the valley below, the ancient oaks around me, the clearing where my life had been forever changed. And then I began the hike back down to my car. The drive home was a blur. I kept seeing the visions, kept hearing his voice, kept feeling the weight of the message I'd been given. When I finally got home, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my Bible and my journal, and I began to write everything down, every detail, every vision, every word he had spoken. And as I wrote, I felt it. The burden, yes, but also something else. Purpose, clarity, a sense that everything in my life, every season of loneliness, every moment of isolation, every experience of being abandoned by the church, it had all been preparation for this moment, for this message, for this calling. I am 51 years old. I am single. I don't have children. I have walked through valleys of loneliness that most people can't imagine. I have been the isolated believer, the suffering saint, the abandoned warrior. I have asked the question that drove me to that clearing: God, why do good people suffer alone? And now I have the answer. Not just the theological answer, but the lived answer, the experienced answer, the answer that comes from sitting with Jesus in a forest clearing for 3 nights and having him tear open the veil and show me the truth. Good people don't suffer alone because God has abandoned them. They suffer alone because the church has abandoned them. And there is a reckoning coming. There is a judgment falling. There is a separation happening between the true and the false, the genuine and the counterfeit, the sheep and the goats. And you who are reading this, you who have made it this far, you are being called to choose. Will you be part of the comfortable church that abandons the suffering, or will you be part of the remnant that actually loves, that actually serves, that actually bears the burdens of those who are walking through darkness? Tomorrow I'll tell you what to do. I'll give you the practical steps, the specific actions, the 30-minute daily challenge that will transform you from someone who just reads about love into someone who actually practices it. I'll tell you how to find the isolated believers in your community, how to reach out to them, how to be the church to them. But tonight, I need you to do something. I need you to sit in the weight of what I've shared. I need you to let it break you the way it broke me. I need you to ask yourself the hard questions. Have I abandoned suffering people? Have I scrolled past their cries for help? Have I been too busy, too comfortable, too focused on my own life to notice the isolated believers around me? Type in the comments, I am broken, because that's where transformation begins. Not with having all the answers, not with being comfortable, but with being broken open by the truth. Type it now. I am broken. And come back tomorrow for the final part, because what I'm going to share with you, the practical application, the specific steps, the urgent deadline, it's going to give you a chance to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. It's going to give you a chance to be the church that Jesus is looking for, the church that actually loves the suffering instead of abandoning them. The judgment is coming, but so is the restoration, and you get to choose which side you're on. I didn't go back to the clearing on February 12th. I couldn't. My body was exhausted, my emotions were raw, and my spirit felt like it had been stretched beyond its capacity. I spent that entire day in my apartment, alternating between prayer, writing, and staring at the walls, trying to process everything I'd witnessed over those 3 nights. But on February 13th, in the late afternoon, I felt a pull, a gentle but insistent prompting to return to the clearing one more time, not at night, not for another encounter, but in the daylight, to see the place where my life had been forever changed, to ground myself in the physical reality of what had happened in the spiritual realm. I arrived at the trailhead around 4:30 p.m. The temperature was warmer now, in the mid-40s, and the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The hike up felt different in daylight, less mysterious, more ordinary. I could see the details I'd missed in the darkness, the way the manzanita bushes twisted along the trail, the patterns of lichen on the rocks, the small wildflowers beginning to emerge despite it being only February. When I reached the clearing at 5:15 p.m., I stopped at the edge and just looked. In the daylight, it was beautiful but unremarkable. The ancient oaks were just trees, magnificent trees certainly, scarred and twisted by centuries of wind and weather, but just trees. The flat rock in the center was just a rock, smooth and wide, perfect for sitting, but just a rock. The view of the valley below was stunning, but it was the kind of view you could find at dozens of spots in these mountains. And yet I knew what had happened here. I knew that in this ordinary place the extraordinary had broken through. I knew that on this rock I had sat with Jesus. I knew that in this clearing, surrounded by these ancient oaks, the veil between heaven and earth had been torn open, and I had been shown things that would mark me for the rest of my life. I walked to the rock and sat down, running my hand over its smooth surface. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the clearing, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. A breeze moved through the oak branches, creating that whispered conversation sound I'd heard on the first night. And in the quiet of that moment, I heard his voice again, not audibly, not with the thunder and authority of the third night, but in my spirit, gentle and clear. Now you tell them how to love. I pulled out my journal and began to write. And what poured out of me over the next hour wasn't just my words, it was his heart, his instruction, his practical roadmap for how the church can return to genuine love, how individual believers can actually care for the suffering instead of just posting about them on social media. This is what he gave me to give to you. Listen to me carefully. What I'm about to share with you is not optional. It's not a suggestion. It's not something you can read, nod your head at, and then forget about. This is a mandate. This is a command. This is Jesus himself telling you, through me, through these encounters, through the visions he showed me, how to be the church he's looking for instead of the church he's about to judge. You have 30 days from today. That means your deadline is March 15th, 2026. 30 days to begin implementing what I'm about to tell you. 30 days to move from being someone who just consumes Christian content to someone who actually lives out the radical, inconvenient, costly love that Jesus commanded. Why 30 days? Because that's what he told me. Because that's the window of grace he's giving, before the shaking intensifies, before the judgment accelerates, before the separation between the true and the false becomes undeniable. Here's what you're going to do, not what you should do, not what would be nice if you did, what you are going to do if you're serious about following Jesus, if you're serious about being part of the solution instead of part of the problem. The 30-minute daily challenge. Every single day for the next 30 days, you are going to spend 30 minutes actively loving someone who is suffering in isolation, not praying for them, though prayer is important, not posting about them on social media, though awareness is good, actually, tangibly, practically loving them. Here's how. Week 1, identification, days 1 to 7. Your first week is about opening your eyes to see the isolated believers around you. They're there. They've always been there. You've just been too busy, too comfortable, too focused on your own life to notice them. Spend 30 minutes each day this week doing this. Day 1, make a list. Write down every person you know who might be suffering in isolation. The elderly person from church you haven't seen in months. The single parent who always looks exhausted. The person who used to be active in your small group but has disappeared. The coworker who eats lunch alone every day. The neighbor whose spouse died last year. Write them all down. Don't edit yourself. Don't talk yourself out of including someone because they're probably fine. Write them down. Day 2, research. Go through your church directory, your Facebook friends, your phone contacts. Look for people who used to be active but have gone silent. Look for people who post about struggles but never get responses. Look for people whose life circumstances suggest they might be isolated, recent divorce, job loss, chronic illness, death of a loved one. Add them to your list. Day 3, pray. Take your list and pray over each name. Ask Jesus to show you who he wants you to focus on. Ask him to reveal the depth of their suffering, the reality of their isolation. Ask him to break your heart for what breaks his, and listen. Pay attention to which names keep coming back to your mind, which people you can't stop thinking about. Day 4, choose 3. From your list, choose 3 people that you're going to commit to loving actively for the next 30 days. Not 300, not 30. 3. Because genuine love is not scalable. Genuine love requires time, attention, presence. Choose 3 people that Jesus has put on your heart, 3 people who are suffering in isolation, 3 people who need someone to actually show up. Day 5, gather information. Spend your 30 minutes learning everything you can about these 3 people. What are their specific circumstances? What are their specific needs? What are their specific struggles? Don't assume. Don't guess. If you don't know, find out. Ask mutual friends. Look at their social media. Pay attention to what they're saying and not saying. Day 6, make a plan. For each of your 3 people, write down 3 specific, practical ways you could help them. Not vague things like be there for them. Specific things. Bring them groceries every Tuesday. Invite them to dinner every Friday. Offer to drive them to their medical appointments. Help them with their yard work. Sit with them for an hour every week and just listen. Specific, practical, actionable. Day 7, reach out. This is the hardest day. This is where most people will quit, will talk themselves out of it, will decide they're too busy or it's too awkward or someone else should do it. Don't quit. Spend your 30 minutes reaching out to your 3 people. Call them, text them, show up at their door, tell them you've been thinking about them, tell them you want to help, tell them you're not going to disappear. And here's the key. Don't ask them what they need. Tell them what you're going to do. because people who are suffering in isolation have learned not to ask for help. They've learned that asking leads to disappointment, so don't make them ask. Tell them, I'm bringing you dinner on Tuesday. I'm coming over on Friday to help you clean. I'm picking you up for church on Sunday. Give them something concrete to say yes or no to. Week 2. Initiation. Days 8 to 14. This week is about following through. This is where you prove that you're not just another person who makes promises and then disappears. This is where you show up. Spend 30 minutes each day this week doing this. Days 8-14. Execute your plan. Do what you said you were going to do. Bring the groceries, make the dinner, show up for the visit, help with the yard work, drive them to the appointment. And here's what's crucial. Don't make it about you. Don't do it so you can post about it on social media. Don't do it so you can feel good about yourself. Don't do it so you can tell everyone at church what a good person you are. Do it because Jesus commanded it. Do it because this is what love actually looks like. Do it because these people have been abandoned by the church and you're going to be different. And listen. Really listen. When you're with them, put your phone away. Make eye contact. Ask questions. Let them talk. Let them cry. Let them be angry. Let them be real. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to give them advice. Don't try to spiritualize their suffering with trite Christian platitudes. Just be present. Just listen. Just love them. Week 3, intensification, days 15-21. This week is about going deeper. By now, you've established a pattern. You've shown up consistently. You've proven you're not going to disappear. Now you're going to intensify your commitment. Spend 30 minutes each day this week doing this. Days 15-21, increase your involvement. Add another layer to what you're already doing. If you've been bringing them groceries, also invite them to your home for a meal. If you've been visiting them once a week, increase it to twice a week. If you've been helping with practical tasks, also start including them in your social life. Invite them to the movie you're seeing, the game you're watching, the walk you're taking. And here's what's going to happen. It's going to get inconvenient. It's going to interfere with your schedule. It's going to cost you time and money and energy. You're going to want to quit. You're going to think, I've done enough. Someone else can take over now. Don't quit. This is where you discover whether you're actually following Jesus or just playing Christian. Because Jesus didn't love people when it was convenient. He didn't serve people when it fit his schedule. He didn't bear people's burdens when it was easy. He loved to the point of inconvenience, to the point of exhaustion, to the point of death. And he's calling you to do the same. Week 4, integration, days 22-30. This final week is about making this a permanent part of your life, not just a 30-day challenge. This is about transformation, about becoming someone who actually lives out the radical love of Jesus instead of just talking about it. Spend 30 minutes each day this week doing this. Days 22-28, evaluate and adjust. Look at what's working and what's not. Are your 3 people responding? Are they opening up? Are they beginning to heal? Or are there barriers you need to address? Maybe one of them needs professional help, therapy, medical care, financial counseling that you can help them access. Maybe one of them needs to be connected with other people, not just you. Maybe one of them needs something different than what you've been providing. Pay attention, adjust, be flexible. Love is not one size fits all. Day 29. Recruit others. You can't do this alone forever, and you shouldn't. The goal is not for you to be the only person loving these 3 people. The goal is to build a community around them, to show them what the church is supposed to be. So spend this day recruiting others to join you. Talk to people at your church. Talk to your small group. Talk to your friends. Tell them about your 3 people. Tell them about the needs. Ask them to join you in loving them. Build a team. Day 30, commit long term. This is the most important day. This is where you decide whether this was just a 30-day experiment or a permanent transformation. Spend your 30 minutes this day making a long-term commitment. Tell your 3 people that you're not going anywhere, that you're in this for the long haul, that they can count on you, and then commit to continuing, not necessarily 30 minutes every single day, but a consistent, ongoing, reliable presence in their lives. I'm sitting on this rock in the clearing as I write this, and the sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple and orange. The ancient oaks are silhouetted against the color, their twisted branches reaching toward heaven like they're praying, and I'm thinking about Margaret and Robert and all the others Jesus showed me, all the isolated believers suffering alone, wondering if anyone sees them, if anyone cares, if anyone will show up, and I'm thinking about you reading this right now, you who have made it all the way through this 4-part message, you who have been marked, who have been chosen, who have been called to be part of the solution. Here's what I need you to understand. This is not just a nice idea. This is not just an inspiring message. This is a mandate from Jesus himself. This is him telling you, through me, through these encounters, through the visions he showed me in this clearing, that the time for comfortable Christianity is over. The judgment is coming. It's already here. Churches are going to close. Ministries are going to fall. Leaders are going to be exposed. The shaking has begun and it's going to intensify. But in the midst of the judgment, there's going to be a remnant. There's going to be a group of believers who actually look like Jesus, who actually love the suffering, who actually bear one another's burdens. And that remnant is going to build something new, a church that the gates of hell cannot prevail against, a church that the world will recognize by its love, a church that Jesus will be proud to call his bride. You can be part of that remnant, but only if you act, only if you move from consuming content to actually living it out, only if you take the 30-minute daily challenge seriously, only if you choose 3 people and commit to loving them actively, tangibly, practically. Your deadline is March 15th, 2026. 30 days from today. That's not arbitrary. That's what Jesus told me. That's the window of grace he's giving you to begin this transformation. What happens if you don't? What happens if you read this message, feel inspired for a moment, and then go back to your comfortable life without changing anything? I'll tell you what happens. You'll be part of the church that Jesus judges instead of the church that Jesus honors. You'll be one of the people who says, "Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name?" And hears him respond, "I never knew you. Depart from me." You'll be one of the goats instead of the sheep, separated out because when Jesus was hungry and thirsty and sick and in prison, embodied in the suffering believers around you, you did nothing. Is that what you want? Is that the legacy you want to leave? Is that how you want to stand before Jesus one day? I didn't think so. So here's what you're going to do right now. Not later, not tomorrow, right now. First, type in the comments the names of your 3 people. You don't have to give their full names or identifying details, just their first names or initials. Type, "I commit to loving, name, name, and name for the next 30 days and beyond." Make it public. Make it real. Make yourself accountable. Second, set a daily alarm on your phone for your 30-minute challenge. Pick a time that works for you, morning, afternoon, evening, and set an alarm that will remind you every single day. Title it, "Love the Suffering." Third, tell someone, not just anyone. Tell someone who will hold you accountable, who will check in with you, who will ask you how it's going and won't let you quit when it gets hard. Text them right now. Tell them what you're committing to. Ask them to hold you accountable. Fourth, start today. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait until you have everything figured out. Start today. Spend 30 minutes right now on day 1 of the challenge, making your list of people who might be suffering in isolation. Start now. The sun has set now. The clearing is in twilight, that magical time between day and night when the world seems to hold its breath. The stars are beginning to appear one by one, the same stars that were shining on the nights when Jesus appeared to me here. I'm about to hike back down to my car, back to my normal life, back to the world that doesn't know what happened in this clearing over 4 nights in February 2026. But I'm not the same person who drove up this mountain on February 9th. I've been marked, changed, ruined for comfortable Christianity, and if you've read this far, so have you. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unsee what I've shown you. You can't unhear the words Jesus spoke in this clearing. You're marked now. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be part of the comfortable church that abandons the suffering? Or are you going to be part of the remnant that actually loves them? Are you going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? Are you going to be a goat or a sheep? The choice is yours, but the deadline is real. March 15th, 2026. 30 days, the clock is ticking. I want to hear from you. I need to hear from you. In the comments, I need you to be honest. Tell me, are you one of the isolated believers? Are you one of the suffering saints who has been abandoned by the church? Tell me your story. Let me know you're not alone. Or are you someone who has abandoned suffering people? Have you been too comfortable, too busy, too focused on yourself? Be honest. Confession is the first step toward transformation. Who are your 3 people? Who are you committing to love for the next 30 days and beyond? What's your biggest fear about taking this challenge? What's holding you back? Be honest, be real, be vulnerable, because that's where transformation happens, not in pretending we have it all together, but in admitting we don't, in confessing our failures, in committing to do better. And if you're serious about this, if you're really committed to being part of the remnant, part of the solution, part of the church that Jesus is looking for, then subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, because I'm going to be sharing more encounters, more messages, more practical challenges. This is just the beginning. The church is being shaken. The judgment is falling. The separation is happening. But the restoration is coming too. The remnant is rising. The true church, the church that actually loves, that actually serves, that actually bears one another's burdens, is being revealed. And you get to be part of it. But only if you act, only if you move, only if you take the 30-minute daily challenge seriously. Your three people are waiting. They're suffering in isolation right now, wondering if anyone sees them, if anyone cares, if anyone will show up. Will you be the one who shows up? Will you be the answer to their prayers? Will you be the church that Jesus is looking for? The clearing is dark now. The stars are bright overhead, the same stars that witnessed Jesus' appearance here. I'm standing at the edge, looking out over the valley one last time, seeing the lights of the city below, knowing that scattered throughout that city are the isolated believers, the suffering saints, the abandoned warriors. And I'm praying that you, yes, you reading this right now, will be the one who finds them, who loves them, who shows them that they haven't been forgotten. I'm praying that 30 days from now, on March 15th, 2026, you'll be able to look back and see that this message changed your life, that these encounters changed your trajectory, that you moved from being a consumer of Christian content to being an actual follower of Jesus. I'm praying that when you stand before him one day, you'll hear the words every believer longs to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. The time is now. The deadline is March 15th, 2026. The choice is yours. Don't waste it.